The shadow files the Thames torso murders the devil in the Whitechapel fog. The heavy, mournful swell of a cathedral pipe organ bleeds into the silence. We are in a windowless interrogation room, the air thick with the smell of ozone and old iron. A single drop of water echoes as it hits a metal table drip, followed by the wet, rhythmic sliding of a surgical scalpel parting dense muscle. It is the sound of a master at work. Tell me, as you splashed cold water on your face this morning, or took that mundane sip from your glass, did you feel the phantom sting of history? What if I told you that the very water sustaining you still carries the molecular ghost of a 130-year-old bloodbath? In 1887, London wasn't the crown jewel of the empire, it was a sprawling, fog-choked slaughterhouse. That May, as the black bile of the Thames churned, it breached the surface. Those who saw it didn't scream. They couldn't. The sheer, primal wrongness of the sight stole the very air from their lungs. It wasn't the bloated carcass of a beast. It was a human torso, flayed and dismantled with the terrifying precision of a master architect following a blueprint from hell. But the true horror lay in what was missing. No arms, no legs, and no head, no mouth left to recount the final, agonizing plea for mercy. The incision sites weren't hacked or jagged, they were smooth, pale, and clinical, as if the limbs had been exhaled from the body rather than severed. This was no back alley butcher. This was an alchemist of flesh and bone, a man who viewed the human form as nothing more than a vessel to be drained and discarded. Today, on The Shadow Files, we reach into the silt of the Thames to exhume a truth so depraved it defies 130 years of silence. We are opening Pandora's box, and it reeks of copper and rot. The scene shifts to the labyrinthine alleys of Victorian London. Gaslights flicker like dying stars against soot-stained brick. The cobblestones are slick with a cocktail of horse manure, industrial bile, and something darker. You can almost smell the rancid tang of the slums. London was a city of masks, hiding its filth behind a veil of impenetrable fog. From that first left arm found in Rainham to the thigh discovered in Chelsea, the killer used the city as his personal macabre gallery. He wasn't hiding his work, he was curating it, placing pieces of his victims at different points of the compass as if daring the Metropolitan Police to solve his grisly puzzle. The surgeons who performed the autopsies felt their blood turn to ice. The skill involved was supernatural. The killer hadn't used a saw to hack through bone, he had glided a blade through the delicate architecture of the joints, separating ligament from socket without a single stray mark. This wasn't the work of a man in a rage. It was the work of a man in a trance, a surgeon who had performed this ritual 1,000 times in his mind before ever touching the steel to the skin. He dismantled these women like a watchmaker taking apart a broken clock, utterly devoid of empathy, consumed only by the perfection of the cut. The atmosphere grows claustrophobic. The sound of heavy chains dragging across stone floors mingles with the high-pitched, metallic shriek of a blade being whetted on a stone. As the investigation deepened, a sickening pattern emerged. The remains were exsanguinated, completely drained of blood. The killer didn't just kill, he processed. He would hoist his victims by their ankles to the cellar rafters, slitting the carotid artery with surgical grace, allowing every drop of life to drain into a waiting basin. Picture it, a damp cellar lit by a single, guttering tallow candle. A woman, gagged and inverted, forced to listen to the rhythmic pitter-patter of her own life's blood hitting the floor, while inches away, her captor calmly sharpens his tools. She died in the dark, feeling her consciousness fade as the killer admired the grain of her muscle. This wasn't murder, it was a cold, intellectual experiment, where the human soul was merely a byproduct to be thrown to the rats. By October 1888, the city was paralyzed by the shadow of Jack the Ripper. But the Thames butcher was a more sophisticated breed of monster. While the Ripper was a beast of the gutters, the butcher was a demon in a top hat. He hand-delivered his masterpiece to the basement of the new Scotland Yard construction site, the very heart of the police force, wrapped neatly in the morning's headlines. It was a silent, arrogant laugh in the face of justice. Thousands of headless mannequins bob in the black water of the Thames, their plastic limbs tangling in the weeds. Suddenly, a pale, unmistakably human hand breaks the surface, reaching for the moonlight. The most haunting enigma remains: not a single head was ever recovered. Where did they go? Does a collection of glass jars sit in a forgotten attic, filled with the preserved gazes of the lost? Or were the faces removed to protect the identities of those who walked in the highest circles of society? The dark corners of the internet whisper a theory that chills the marrow. Some say the killer was a royal physician, harvesting fresh cerebral tissue and endocrine glands to brew a tincture of immortality for an elite obsessed with cheating death. To that intellectual devil, these women were merely biological components. Even now, on a rainy night by the river, they say you can hear a sound like a wet sob caught in the wind. Where is my face? Who has my eyes? The interrogation room lights die. Only the narrator's silhouette remains, backlit by a cold, surgical glow. He leans forward, his voice a razor-thin whisper. The butcher was never caught. He likely lived a long, decorated life as a pillar of the community, saving lives by day and unmaking them by night in his private sanctuary of screens. He died in a warm bed, his secrets tucked safely under a silk shroud. Look at your neighbor, the one who is a bit too fond of his knives, the one with the locked basement and the medical hobbies. When you smell that faint, metallic tang coming from his vents, don't call it trash. It might just be the 130-year-old routine of the butcher, reborn in the house next door. Check your window. Is that a man in a dark coat standing in the fog? Or is the darkness just taking a shape that fits your silhouette? Subscribe and like, it's the only way to keep the light on. This has been The Shadow Files. See you at the threshold of the next nightmare.